In 1587, over 100 English settlers vanished from Roanoke Island without leaving a trace. Homes stood empty, supplies abandoned, and the only clue was a single word carved into a tree, CROATOAN. What happened to the lost colony remains one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries, an eerie disappearance that continues to haunt history, leaving more questions than answers. The story of Roanoke begins in the ambitious age of exploration, when England sought to establish its presence in the New World. In 1587, more than 100 men, women and children set sail across the Atlantic under the leadership of Governor John White. Their mission was bold: to build a permanent settlement on Roanoke Island, off the coast of present-day North Carolina. The settlers dreamed of fertile land, thriving communities, and a foothold in a new continent. At first, there was hope. Houses were constructed, fields were cleared, and families began to imagine a life in this strange and distant land. But survival was far from easy. Supplies were scarce, relations with local tribes were fragile, and the challenges of an unfamiliar environment weighed heavily on the colonists. Crops withered, storms battered the coast, and the settlers realized they needed greater support from England to endure. Governor John White decided to sail back to England to secure fresh provisions. Though reluctant to leave, he believed his absence would be brief, perhaps only a few months. He left behind his family, including his daughter and newborn granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. As White departed, the colony watched the horizon, awaiting the day his ship would return with the lifeline they so desperately needed. But that return would not come quickly. War with Spain delayed White's voyage for years, and when he finally set sail back to Roanoke in 1590, the colony he had left behind was nowhere to be found. When John White finally stepped back onto Roanoke Island in 1590, 3 long years had passed since he had last seen his family and fellow settlers. His heart raced with anticipation as he searched for signs of life. But what he found was silence. The settlement was deserted. Houses stood abandoned, their wooden walls weathered by storms, gardens lay overgrown, and personal belongings were gone. Yet there were no signs of violence, no bodies, no wreckage, no evidence of a desperate struggle. The only clue was carved into a wooden post at the edge of the settlement, the word CROATOAN. Nearby, the letters CRO were etched into the bark of a tree. White remembered that before he left, the colonists had agreed on a signal. If they moved the settlement, they would carve a word to show where they had gone. If danger had forced them, they would add a cross. There was no cross. The word pointed to CROATOAN Island, now known as Hatteras, home to a Native American tribe with whom the settlers had tentative ties. White was certain this was the answer, that his people had relocated and were waiting for him there. But fate was cruel. A violent storm struck before he could reach the island. His ship, already battered from the long journey, was forced to turn back. John White would never return to Roanoke again, and the mystery of the lost colony was sealed into history. What had truly happened to the 1115 men, women and children remained unanswered, their fate obscured by time, rumor and speculation. As news of the vanished colony spread, theories began to multiply. Some believed the settlers had indeed joined the CROATOAN people, intermarrying and blending into the local tribes. Over time, reports emerged of native communities with grey eyes or lighter features, fueling speculation that the colonists had left behind more than just their tools and houses. This theory suggested survival, but it also blurred the lines between two worlds, European settlers and indigenous nations. Others whispered darker possibilities. Perhaps hostile tribes had attacked after relations soured, wiping out the colonists completely. Yet White had seen no evidence of bloodshed or destruction, no ruined houses or broken defenses. Could such devastation have left no trace at all? Another theory turned to the wilderness itself. The colonists might have tried to sail back to England or to another settlement, only to be lost at sea. Hunger, disease and storms could have consumed them far from the island, leaving no record of their fate. In later years, strange discoveries deepened the mystery. Artifacts surfaced. English tools, weapons and ceramics found hundreds of miles from Roanoke. Were these signs that the settlers had scattered across the land, or were they traded by native tribes long after the colony vanished? Each fragment of evidence raised new questions, but provided no certainty. The lost colony became a story without an ending, a puzzle where every piece only seemed to make the picture more unclear. The word CROATOAN lingered like a whisper across centuries, a riddle carved in wood that no one could fully solve. For generations, the disappearance of the Roanoke colonists haunted the imagination of explorers, scholars, and storytellers. Each passing decade added new layers to the mystery. Some believed supernatural forces were at work, weaving tales of curses, spirits, and restless ghosts. They claimed the colonists had angered the land or its native guardians, vanishing into another realm beyond human comprehension. These legends turned Roanoke into more than a lost settlement. It became a place of fear and fascination. Others clung to political intrigue as the explanation. England and Spain were locked in conflict during this period, and whispers suggested that Spanish forces seeking to crush English expansion in the New World might have destroyed the colony in secret. If so, why was there no evidence of battle? No ruins, no weapons, only silence. The absence of proof was as haunting as the mystery itself. Over time, the CROATOAN word carved into the post took on a mythic quality. Was it a simple direction, pointing to where the settlers had gone, or was it something deeper, a warning, a message, or perhaps even the last desperate act of a dying community? The more scholars debated, the more symbolic the word became, embodying the thin line between history and legend. By the 17th century, the Roanoke story was already considered unsolvable, yet it remained alive in whispered tales. Sailors, settlers, and native peoples alike carried fragments of the mystery, passing it down like folklore. The colony's silence became louder than any explanation, echoing through time as America's first great unsolved riddle. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the legend of the lost colony had grown into one of America's most enduring mysteries. Writers and historians tried to uncover the truth, but with each attempt, the lines between fact and folklore blurred even further. Some accounts spoke of native tribes who claimed their ancestors had absorbed the colonists, teaching them to survive in the forests and swamps. Travelers told stories of villages where English words were whispered alongside native tongues, and children with curious features were said to be descendants of Roanoke's lost settlers. Archaeological evidence, however, remained elusive. Occasional reports of artifacts, iron tools, fragments of pottery, strange markings surfaced, but none provided conclusive answers. Each discovery seemed to open more questions than it solved. Were these items remnants of the colonists themselves, or simply trade goods passed from hand to hand across tribes and territories? As the United States grew and its identity took shape, the story of Roanoke became part of its cultural fabric. Poets and novelists seized on the mystery, crafting tales of doomed love, betrayal, or supernatural vengeance. The colony's silence became a canvas upon which imagination could paint freely. Yet amid the romance and drama, one fact never changed. No one knew where the colonists had gone. 115 men, women, and children had vanished into the wilderness, their lives swallowed by time. The absence of answers made the story even more powerful. Roanoke was not just a historical event, it had become a symbol of the unknown, a haunting reminder of how fragile human endeavors can be when faced with nature, conflict, and fate. In the 20th century, the Roanoke mystery gained renewed attention as historians, archaeologists, and even amateur explorers tried to unlock its secrets. Excavations on Roanoke Island revealed traces of the original settlement, but no definitive signs of what happened to its people. Digging deeper, researchers uncovered shards of pottery, rusted tools, and small household items, evidence that a community had once thrived there, but nothing that explained its disappearance. Attention shifted to nearby Hatteras Island, the land once known as CROATOAN. There, archaeologists discovered artifacts of European origin, gun barrels, coins, and fragments of English ceramics. To some, this was proof that at least part of the colony had moved and integrated with the CROATOAN tribe. Others argued these items might have been acquired through trade long after the colony vanished. The evidence was tantalizing but inconclusive. Meanwhile, myths and legends flourished. Writers suggested that the colonists had been wiped out by disease or famine, their remains lost to the elements. Some speculated they had attempted to sail back to England and were swallowed by the Atlantic. More fantastical theories claimed they had fallen victim to supernatural forces, taken by spirits that guarded the wilderness. Every new clue seemed to create more division. For some, Roanoke represented resilience, the possibility that the settlers had survived by adapting to a new way of life. For others, it symbolized tragedy, a cautionary tale about hubris and the dangers of venturing into an untamed world. The lost colony was no longer just a mystery to solve. It was a mirror, reflecting the fears and hopes of each generation that pondered its fate. As the decades rolled on, the lost colony of Roanoke became more than a historical puzzle. It transformed into a legend that captured the imagination of the modern world. Television documentaries, novels, and even supernatural tales wove the disappearance into popular culture. Each retelling added a layer of drama, from ghostly apparitions haunting the island to cursed words carved into the trees. The name CROATOAN itself took on a mythical aura, appearing in works of fiction as a symbol of vanishing, abandonment, and the unexplained. The word resurfaced in chilling ways, centuries after the colony's disappearance. It was reportedly found carved at the site of mysterious events, fueling rumors of a curse that stretched beyond time. While these accounts were often exaggerated or fabricated, they reinforced the idea that Roanoke's mystery was not just historical, but almost supernatural in its reach. For scholars, though, the mystery remained rooted in unanswered questions. Was the colony destroyed, absorbed, or scattered? Why was there no decisive evidence? Even in an age of modern science and technology, Roanoke resisted resolution, as if determined to remain hidden in the fog of history. And so the story lived on, not because of what was known, but because of what was not. The silence of Roanoke became louder with every generation, each one projecting its own fears, beliefs, and imagination onto the empty settlement. The lost colony was no longer just about the past. It had become a timeless legend, an enduring reminder of humanity's endless search for answers in the face of the unknown. Today, more than 4 centuries after the colony vanished, Roanoke remains one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries. Archaeologists continue to dig, uncovering fragments of tools, pottery, and remnants of daily life. But the final chapter is still missing. Modern technology, from DNA analysis to satellite imaging, has been applied in the search, yet no conclusive evidence has surfaced. The puzzle remains intact, as if time itself guards the secret. For the people of the United States, Roanoke has become more than a historical question. It is a story that embodies both hope and fear. Hope in the possibility that the settlers survived by joining with native communities and forging a new life. Fear in the reminder of how quickly a dream can collapse into silence, leaving nothing behind but questions. The lost colony is taught in schools, featured in museums, and remembered in literature and film. Tourists walk the reconstructed settlement on Roanoke Island, standing where the colonists once built their homes, imagining the moment when life suddenly stopped. Memorials mark the site, but they cannot explain the emptiness that lingers, and always the word CROATOAN hangs over the story like a riddle. Was it a clue, a destination, or the final desperate mark of a people fading into history? Until the mystery is solved, if it ever can be, the lost colony will remain suspended between fact and legend, a haunting reminder that even in an age of discovery, some stories are destined to remain unanswered. The lost colony of Roanoke endures as one of history's most haunting riddles. Over 400 years later, no one knows the fate of the 1,115 souls who vanished, leaving behind only a single word, CROATOAN. Whether they perished, adapted, or disappeared into legend, their silence has outlived every explanation. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, that some stories are never meant to be solved.